Asking blue pill, red pill, corporate press, I've had my fill. I'm just a simple chap, believing in my own will. WEF, fire, math, evil, scheming, this is no drill. Haters masking boosted, but still with no chill. Need to come and take it if you wanna mess with my hill. We've been 3D printing, setting ready for that ghost kill.
Hello, Canada, and welcome back to another episode of The Maple Pill. As always, I'm your host, Matt McKeever. Hope you guys are having a good Thursday so far. Appreciate a couple of you have already jumped in the comments. So what's up to Kohana, Graham Griffin, and P58? Appreciate you guys jumping in there. And, you know, tonight we've got a full course of the Maple Pill to be swallowing as well. So we're going to touch upon some items around what's going on in regards to hate speech and hate symbols in Canada. How long do you think it should take for Chrystia Freeland to disclose to Canadians her relationship with World Economic Forum? Do you think it should take more than a year for her to be able to gather that information? And if so, what does that say about her relationship with the World Economic Forum? All that and a lot more in tonight's episode of The Maple Pill. But before we jump into the first story of the day, I know a few of you get kicks out of the fact that, I struggle at times to pronounce words while reading articles and just kind of live streaming here. And, I thought I'd share with you guys someone else that sometimes struggles when it comes to pronouncing words while he's reading the teleprompter.
We're going to accommodate them. We're going to seize their yachts, their luxury homes, and other ill-begotten gains of Putin's kleptocracy. Kleptocracy and the guys who are the kleptocracies. But these are bad guys.
He sounds like hi, Matt. And, you may be asking, well, Matt, how can you really criticize Joe Biden when he's like more than twice your, actually, I don't know how old he is, but about twice my age, maybe. Yeah, probably very close to exactly twice my age. But, how can you criticize him when you often struggle to pronounce words? Well, one key distinction is I'm not trying to rule over anyone else. Meanwhile, that guy's supposed to be, the ruler of the free world, or that's what they often call the president of the United States. So just food for thought. Thought I'd start things off on a lighter note. Although the fact that, our society's being run by a geriatric that I don't think would be able to pass a lot of cognitive tests, I guess it could be worse. Switching gears, getting into the first blue pill story of the day, we're going to be chatting about real estate here. Average Canadian home, twice the price of the average U.S. home. Does anyone see a problem with that? I kind of feel like there could be long-term consequences to that. Is Canada really twice as good as America? I don't think I'd be willing to make that bet or take that bet. According to Fortune magazine, who quote the Canadian Real Estate Association, the standard home in Canada cost almost twice as much as the U.S. equivalent. The publication says since 2020, Canada's home prices have risen 30% since 2020, which RBC chief economist Robert Hogue told Fortune is nothing short of stunning. The average price reached a record $816,720 in February, or $638,000 USD, which is more than 9 times the average household income. But I mean, if you're trying to implement like a new world serfdom, this actually plays perfectly into your long-term plans. And talking further about real estate, this one's from CBC News, why even falling prices won't make housing affordable anytime soon. Even a record 30% drop in prices would only rewind to late 2020. And then looking at better dwelling, Canadian mortgage rates may climb up to 7% by next year, Desjardins. Kind of feels like we may be entering the perfect storm right now. At the same time, we've got the Bank of Canada coming out now saying that Canada's economy is overheated. And because of that, and because of so much pent-up demand and things like that, that's the reason we're experiencing inflation. But I could have sworn just like a couple of days ago, I heard it was because of Russia. And, a couple of days before that, it was because of the supply chain issues. It's just really interesting watching the continuously evolving narrative around inflation. When, I don't know, Occam's razor makes me want to say that it's probably just the fact that you guys have printed so much money over the last couple of years. Or it could be the fact that, our fiat currency is only backed by government promises. And at this point in time, if you trust a government promise, well, you probably deserve to hold fiat currency. Next from National News Watch, Ottawa will not tolerate another occupation. Police chief warns biker convoy. And I think it's important to highlight here that, they're already positioning to demonize the Rolling Thunder convoy. And I forget, I don't know if I misspoke in a previous episode, but someone lit up my comments afterwards saying, Rolling Thunder is not a protest. It's not a demonstration. It's literally people just trying to pay their respects. Honestly, I don't think the Canadian government gives a shit. I think all they care about is politically posturing and, trying to look tough on the wrong type of protester or movement or convoy or whatever you want to frame it as. And it'll be interesting to see how things play out this week. And I'd love to hear from you guys. Are you planning on attending Rolling Thunder? What's your hot take on it? Do you think we'll see something happen this weekend? Do you think this will be a nothing burger? These days, predicting these sort of things, I don't feel comfortable predicting at all because, in the age of hilarious and clown world, how do you predict that shit? It's like an improv class. Post-millennial, and this will bring us into our first red pill story of the day. Harvard commits $100 million to deal with complicity in slavery while fighting to continue discriminating against Asians in admissions. I need to stop trying to read my comments to make sure people aren't spamming while also trying to read an article. It just never ends well. But yeah, there's something really ironic about wanting to crack down or try and correct problems of the past that are, oftentimes we're talking either decades or centuries ago, while meanwhile being okay with implementing wrongs in the modern era, right? The idea that, well, we're going to discriminate against Asian people because they do too well when it comes to standardized testing and admissions to Harvard, but we also want to throw a bunch of money to try and solve past discrimination issues. How do you not see the irony in that, right? How do you not see the hypocrisy involved in that? But at the same time, I think this also raises another interesting question, and I forget if I've remembered to bring it up. Actually, you know what? I think it's in the article here. So Mark Andreessen actually highlighted this, and I think this is a really important point that we should all be thinking about, but particularly right now, the left progressives and those in the administration. They're constantly condemning the institutions of the past for being corrupt, for being biased, for being racist, misogynist, and every other bad word they can think of. And yet they somehow have 100% certainty that the institutions of today are perfect. It doesn't really add up, in my opinion. So Mark Andreessen here, Harvard's faculty and staff enslaved more than 70 Black people. The university also profited from slavery during the 17th, 18th, and 19th centuries. What should this tell us about the moral authority of universities today? What are they wrong about now? And I can't help but feel like decades from now, it'll probably take decades, but decades from now, we'll look back on this era of alarmism and overreactions to a multitude of social problems as also being really wrong-headed. I'd love to hear from you guys. What do you think the universities are most wrong about? Is it about institutionalized biases and racism? Is it talking about transgender rights and the transgender agenda? Is it about hate speech and hate symbolism? There's actually a pretty wide swath of things to look at and at least explore or question. What will we think of ourselves a few decades out from now? Next, from the Western Standard, critics say widely shared study on mixing with unvaccinated contained massive errors. Now, we did a whole special episode of this. I think it was episode 71 on Monday, where I deep dived into it. Again, the study had just came out that day, so it was relatively a hot take. But we're continuing to see more and more people pile on against David Fissman's study. Again, it was a mathematical model he put together that was very simple. And yet, we saw it used across the board when it came to mainstream media in Canada, right? Every single mainstream media news outlet from legacy media had it on their front page, a lot of them with misleading titles, in my humble opinion. And then we saw it being picked up by the international press as well, or at least the international press that has an agenda to push the COVID fear hysteria narrative still. So David Fissman put out a tweet. I've read through some of the critiques of our CMAJ paper, and the too long didn't read is, our paper says exactly what we say it says. No, we won't be retracting it. And so I guess two of my biggest questions to David Fissman on this would be, one, okay, like, I'll take you at your word there, right? You did at least like share with us the model that was used and stuff like that. We can understand and at least interpret how you put it together. But do you think that the way mainstream media is reporting and presenting it is this, fundamental study that needs to be on the front page of every newspaper? Because I really do struggle to believe that anyone that with any intellectual honesty would believe that this paper is so relevant that it deserved to sweep across mainstream media, right? And that it deserved the sort of titles and the natural rhetoric that we're going to hear from politicians when they choose to rely on this. Secondly, does he really believe that using such a simplified mathematical model with all the different errors that, or problematic issues, maybe I should say, that we explored on Monday is really worth discussing, right? Like, if I put together a model with like wrong-headed assumptions, why even discuss the conclusions based upon that model? But if you guys want to go down a big deep dive on this, Byram Bridle has put together on his Substack, and again, link to this as well as everything else I'm sharing with you guys tonight in the video description down below. But he does a very thorough discussion on this study, and he points out a lot of the issues that I highlighted as well as additional issues. But unlike me, he took the extra time. And if we scroll, there's a lot to this, but if we scroll down, he brings up one really important assumption there, right? And that's that natural immunity is 20% effective, right? That was one of the underlying assumptions. We also discussed how, misleading the fact that he cites a range of 40 to 80% effectiveness for the COVID vaccine, and yet chose to assume 80%. Meanwhile, we've got studies and articles and things like that out that have said that natural immunity appears to be as effective or more effective than the COVID shot, right? And particularly, we need to take a step back here and understand that we're already seeing, like, it's well established at this point in time that the COVID vaccine is a leaky vaccine, not a perfect vaccine. So for him to make the assumption that, indefinitely it's effective is just bizarre in the first place. And then secondly, to not understand the fact that it appears, at least based upon the information we've got to date, that it's less effective against the newest strains of COVID. Meanwhile, natural immunity appears to be more resilient to that. But what I really like that Bridle breaks out in this is he essentially changes the assumptions. And if you assume baseline immunity in unvaccinated is 0.85 effective, you come to a completely different set of conclusions where it's essentially the inverse of what David Fissman came to his conclusion on. And so this is where obviously the devil's in the details with these models. I don't think, neither of these is going to be particularly effective because it's such a dynamic system that we're talking about, right? When we're talking about Canada's population or any large population of people, that I don't really see the purpose behind this other than to get the headlines to justify the conclusion that you were seeking in the first place. Next, from the Western Standard, Freeland makes temporary rule around crowdfunding permanent. Now, this isn't particularly surprising, but again, this is why I constantly, rail against any temporary government measures, because they've got this funny habit of somehow becoming permanent. So the finance minister has locked in regulations requiring crowdfunding platforms to report cash donations over $10,000, which was initially introduced as a temporary measure. And, I can't help but wonder what other temporary measures might we encounter over the course of the next couple of years that somehow morph into permanent long-term measures and policy for our government. Next, from Global News, Trudeau says world was shocked and dismayed to see Nazi imagery in Ottawa. And now, obviously, I forget whether it was today or yesterday is like the day of the National Holocaust Memorial. I guess it was on Thursday, so today. So it makes sense to a certain extent that, discussing World War II and the Nazis and the Holocaust this week, has its purpose. But at the same time, it's interesting to see mainstream media and how they want to frame this, right? So it's Justin Trudeau talking about how shocked the world was that one dude on Parliament amongst thousands or maybe 10,000 plus protesters chose to wave a Nazi flag. And yet that individual that did so covered his face, obviously understanding that there's going to be a social judgment associated with doing so, right? Then we've got the news article we covered yesterday or 2 days ago. Time is relative to me, but from Hamilton, or coming out of Hamilton, saying that Hamilton City wants to ban the Confederate flag, right? Because it's a hate symbol. And we've got now pushes that we're going to cover in a second towards trying to ban all hate symbols in Canada. And we end up on these slippery slopes of like, what's a hate symbol, right? What triggers one person might just be a historical relic to another person, right? And this idea that we somehow have to regulate, we have to protect people from their feelings. So if you could be triggered, if you could be offended, if you could be hurt by words or a symbol, we need to proactively step in and stop that from occurring. It just is so asinine, in my opinion. And yet also, I can't help but notice the hypocrisy here, because Trudeau has been seen, when he was doing his campaign with people that had like a swastika on a postcard, like on a bulletin board as well, that they were holding up. But in addition to that, like go to any anti-Israel protest, right, or pro-Palestine protest, and you're often going to see some sorts of Nazi imagery. Again, back when the Freedom Trucker Convoy was constantly in the news, particularly about the Nazi flag, we did a deep dive here on the Maple Pill and just showed like, hey, in my hometown of London, Ontario, just about every single time that there's a parade or a protest for Palestine, you'll see swastikas, right? And again, this is coming from individuals that today want to essentially abolish, destroy, or wipe Israel off the map. So again, like Israel-Palestine, very complicated situation, but I don't think that we should be barring people from using imagery, right? I don't think we should be barring people from free speech. Short of yelling fire in a crowded theater, right, trying to cause direct, immediate havoc and damage with your words, the government should have literally zero role in trying to dictate our speech, our thoughts, or the symbols we choose to use to express ourselves. Next from Blacklock's reporter, MPs open swastika hearings. So the Commons Heritage Committee yesterday opened hearings on whether to ban hate symbols in Canada. Liberal MPs proposed hearing in response to the Freedom Convoy, but deleted the specific reference to the swastika and the Confederate flag after one Conservative suggested the ban also applied to blackface. This cannot continue, said New Democrat MP Peter Julian, sponsor of Bill C-229, an act to amend the criminal code. The bill would prohibit the display or sale of symbols or emblems deemed hateful under the threat of 2 years of jail. A lone man carrying the Nazi flag was photographed last January 29th among 15,000 Freedom Convoy demonstrators on Parliament Hill. The person was never identified. Convoy organizers disavowed any connection to the Nazi. And again, okay, let's say that, everyone decides that the Nazi flag and Confederate flag is bad and evil. Does that mean that literally you just can't use it whatsoever? Can you use it in a historical context, right? Then let's take a step further. What if someone else finds a different flag hurtful or harmful or triggering, right? I'm a big fan of the Gladstone flag, right? I also love the flag, I think it was from the Alamo, the Come and Take It with a cannon on it. And yet, based upon the trajectory we appear to be as a society right now, I can't help but feel, give it 5-10 years from now, and that'll be considered a hate symbol. Hell, we had people saying that they were triggered and scared when they saw a Canadian flag in Ottawa because of the Freedom Trucker Convoy protesters. I cannot trust any politician when it comes to them wanting to regulate free speech or symbols, because I understand history, brah. I guess that's my simplest argument against it. Next from Rebel News, live updates, MPP Randy Hillier's bail review taking place in Ottawa. Criminal defense lawyer David Amber is representing the independent Lanark Frontenac Kingston MPP, and Amber's associate Matthew Wolfson will be live tweeting the proceedings. So if you guys want to actually see, Rebel News has a full breakdown here of Matthew Wolfson's tweets. And I guess it's fascinating to see this play out as well, because Randy Hillier, again, maybe he tweeted some things that you disagree with. Maybe he tweeted some things that you thought were more aggressive than they should be. Maybe you thought he tweeted some misinformation, disinformation. But the only real thing that they seem to point to is one tweet where he called algebra a terrorist. But again, he's called Justin Trudeau and others in the cabinet terrorists. And we had him essentially being banned from Ontario's from Queen's Park. And then beyond that, we've got arguably him inciting people to call emergency lines about police brutality against protesters, and the police saying, do not do that. To see this entire, circus come up around Randy Hillier, to see him have to step out of politics and things of that nature, it's bizarre that this is the Canada that we find ourselves in, because 2-3 years ago, I would have been shocked that we would progress this quickly down that slippery slope. Next from Rebel News, and this is going to bring us into our first Black Pill story of the day. Libs demand 19 months to provide docs on Freeland's WEF relationship. So the Privy Council office said the government needed to conduct consultations that would require a lengthy extension before documents could be turned over. And so this naturally just like, and Rebel News has some kind of funny pot shots that they take at Chrystia Freeland. But I think the biggest question to me is, if it's going to take 19 months to get together your story on your relationship with the World Economic Forum, it's too fucking entangled. Straight up. There's just no ifs, ands, or buts about it, right? If it's going to take 19 months for you to figure out how to explain your story, how to pull your story together, what documents are necessary, you are way too involved with the World Economic Forum, Chrystia Freeland, and that's a conflict of interest, and you either need to choose, do you represent Canada or the World Economic Forum? Yeah, I just, 19 months, right? Like this idea now that, rather than give information, they're just going to delay, obfuscate, deny, right, reverse the victim and perpetrator roles is just wild. I think I messed that up, but it's like DARVO, right? Is that deny, attack, reverse victim order. And that I just wait until we see them essentially reverse this, and Chrystia Freeland come out and, talk about how she's been threatened by anonymous Twitter accounts because of her World Economic Forum relationships. And, maybe she's been too upset by that to get together to pull together this information for the Canadian public. Next from the Globe and Mail, secret documents on fired Winnipeg scientists to be seen by Liberal and NDP committee after deal struck. This is taken way too fucking long in the first place, right? The Winnipeg, the two scientists from China, essentially, that, right before Wuhan, right before COVID-19 and the virus leak, that essentially were fired, and the government just covered it up, said national security. And again, we're going to see this more and more in Canada, where they're just going to say national security, and they're just going to cross their fingers that no one has the balls to call them on it. And then if they do, they're probably just going to put together a panel like what they're doing here, where it's just going to be the Liberals and the NDP without the official opposition to hold them accountable. And they'll just like pat themselves on the back, right? Or it'll just be a giant circle jerk. The Liberal government and the NDP have struck a deal to set up an ad hoc committee without the approval of the official opposition that will gain access to secret documents on the firings of two infectious disease scientists at Canada's high-security microbiology lab. The panel will not be a committee of Parliament, which means it will not have the delegated authority and investigative powers of the House of Commons. So this is just like a show trial, right? Like this isn't about actually getting to the bottom of anything. This is just going to be something that the Liberals in the future point to and say, see, we did something about it, so shut up. Let's move on to a different scandal that we've caused. The two scientists lost their security clearance in July 2019, and the RCMP was called in to investigate. Dr. Cui, who headed the vaccine development and antiviral therapies section at the Winnipeg lab, and Mr. Cheng were dismissed in January 2021. Opposition parties have been demanding for 9 months that the Liberal government make public, unredacted versions of the documents. The government has declined to do so and warned their release could jeopardize national security. And just in case you're kind of wondering what we're talking about here, more than 250 pages of records have been withheld in their entirety from MPs, and hundreds of others have been partially censored. MPs have been seeking documents relating to March 2019 transfer of deadly virus samples to the Wuhan Institute of Virology that was overseen by Dr. Cui. The RCMP investigation centers on the possibility that materials such as plasmid DNA molecules, which could be used to recreate vaccines or viruses, were transferred to Chinese authorities without the approval of public health agency. Call me a conspiracy theorist, but I believe this is just the tip of the iceberg, and I don't think the Liberal or NDP panel or committee here that's essentially like non-binding is going to do jack shit other than just give a paper shield to the Liberal government. Next, let's talk about Jagmeet Singh and his continuing just to double down on COVID and mandates and stuff like that. But what's interesting is he makes some pretty bold assumptions here that I don't believe we've got any data to justify.
We know that the vast majority of Canadians want to do their part to keep people safe and want to get vaccinated. And we also know that the vast majority of Canadians believe in having some way to prove that vaccination, having a vaccine passport. And we know that people on the front line that are providing care or providing services directly to Canadians can pose a higher risk and should be vaccinated. So we would work with unions and work with the workers on the ground to make sure we establish a way to move forward. But we absolutely believe that there needs to be mandatory vaccines, and there would be consequences for those who are not able to or not willing to do that. And we can look at what those consequences are.
So yeah, I find it interesting how often government officials are willing to just associate their position with the majority's position, right? We know that the majority of people, we know the majority of frontline workers, we know the whatever. Well, wait, didn't the government have to enact the Emergencies Act because so many people disagreed with mandatory vaccinations that for the first time in the history of Canada, we enacted that Emergencies Act against our own citizens? Yeah. So which is it, right? I don't think you can just like, without citing some sort of study, or ideally, let's run a referendum on the subject matter, jump to these conclusions, right? And yet so often we see politicians comfortable in just, I think, their personal echo chambers or their political echo chambers, that of course everyone must agree with them. Or of course, all the smart people, all the right people must agree with them, because they're so blinded by their own pride, their own ego, that they know inherently that they're right, and so inherently that must mean that everyone else agrees with them. Next from Timcast, Moderna seeking FDA authorization for COVID vaccine in children as young as 6 months. Moderna CEO said there is a need for a vaccine against COVID-19 in infants and young children, prompting their request for approval. So you might be thinking, well, what's this really got to do with Canada? Well, from CBC News, Moderna expects to seek Canadian approval of COVID-19 vaccine for children under 6 shortly. And so, again, my biggest question here is there tons of kids dying because of COVID-19? Because I'm pretty sure all the data shows that the flu is actually more dangerous to these young children than COVID-19. We don't mandate the flu shot, and we shouldn't mandate the flu shot. And so, my logic goes that we definitely shouldn't be, emergency approving these sorts of things for children either. Because immediately, if and when this gets approved, I think we all know that we're going to immediately see the government change, future policy around mandatory vaccinations and things of that nature. And that's just going to be used to demonize small children, as well as what we've already seen with everyone else that's unvaccinated in Canada. Next from Martyr Made, in addition to what's already been spent, Biden is seeking 5% of the total U.S. military budget to prop up Ukraine's war effort just through September. We are already at war with Russia, and when Russia retaliates, it will be portrayed as irrational and unprovoked. And I kind of agree with it at this point in time. Like, we, the West or NATO or however you want to frame it, are sending so much arms, so much weaponry, and so much financial support to Ukraine that if and when things escalate, we're going to see mainstream media be like, see, this is another sign that Russia's crazy. And it's going to be like, no, it's going to be that Russia understands that they're fighting a proxy war with NATO already, and that, they've already seen Putin being demonized as genocidal, right? We literally covered that yesterday. Canada Parliament stating that they're recognizing it as genocide in regards to Russia's actions in Ukraine. We're backing him into a corner. We're throwing everything we have at him other than directly our own soldiers. Yeah, this is going to only escalate things further. And it's really just the the industrial warfare machine that's going to benefit from it, right? The industrial military complex. From Ron Paul Institute, $4 billion and counting, the DC war machine feasts on Ukraine. After going a full administration without a new war to fill their coffers, the DC defense industry has finally found their next big prize. After dismissing the prospect of diplomacy between Ukraine and Russia, the Biden administration continues to flood Ukraine with an endless supply of military hardware while using extra constitutional means to perpetually lengthen the size and scope of America's involvement in the Russia-Ukraine war. Pfizer, Moderna, and Johnson & Johnson had their time to shine, but now it's the defense contractors' time to hoover up all it can from the taxpayer-funded Beltway regime. Welcome back to your place in the spotlight and hop on back aboard the U.S. taxpayer gravy train. Boeing, Raytheon, Lockheed, and friends, there's an ongoing inter-Slavic conflict 5,000 miles away from our shores, and the war machine is ready to eat. Yes, I think that imagery sums up what we're experiencing perfectly. Next from National Review, Biden's Ministry of Truth. And, they at least had the foresight not to literally call it the Ministry of Truth, but this feels very Orwellian, right out of 1984. The Biden administration's new Committee on Public Information will be led by Nina Jankowicz, a disinformation fellow who perfectly enough comes to the administration from a think tank named after Woodrow Wilson. And, if you guys want to dive into her backstory, but she's someone that, believed that Hunter Biden's laptop was simply a fiction of Trump and misinformation and things of that nature. And yet this is going to be the lady that's going to decide what public information is allowed in public discourse in America. America, you're like our one hope right now. Canada is absolutely falling apart. For the love of God, can you not fall apart too? Or at least, can you guys at least not fuck up Florida, Texas, South Dakota, and the handful of other states? Because, where's my plan B going to be if you guys go full Canadian, authoritarian, Chinese, communist dictatorship as well? I need a place, right? Like, we all need that one place we can at least dream of as being our citadel, our safe haven. And right now, it feels like it has to be in the jungle or the wilderness in northern Canada, where just no one will ever find you, in order to actually feel like you're going to be safe from the regime and all their measures and all their policies. Switching gears from black pill, let's move into a clown pill. This would be a lot funnier if it didn't actually have consequences for the individual we're talking about. But yeah, the suspect, and this is an older story from 2017, but I think just highlights the craziness at times that is our judicial system. The suspect told police, "Give me a lawyer, dog." The court says he wasn't asking for a lawyer. So the court argued essentially that he was asking for a lawyer dog rather than, "Hey, can you get me a lawyer?" And when a suspect in an interrogation told detectives to just give me a lawyer, dog, the Louisiana Supreme Court ruled that the suspect was in fact asking for a lawyer, dog, and not a lawyer. That's how much these people care about your rights and freedoms, right? Next from Toronto Sun, and this is going to be our first white pill story of the day. Poilievre vows to audit Bank of Canada and ban proposed digital currency. And I really wish that most of mainstream media would have at least done the credit of saying a central bank digital currency, because there's a huge distinction there. I got to be honest. Pierre is slowly winning me over. I know he's a career politician. I don't think you can ever really trust career politicians other than Ron Paul. But again, he was a doctor as well, and just someone that was always consistent in his beliefs and actions. But I honestly can't imagine someone actually becoming prime minister and auditing the Bank of Canada and banning them from central bank digital currencies, CBDCs. If he somehow pulls this off, I could forgive a lot if he somehow manages to pull that off. And so I'm going to count that. I'm chalking it up as a white pill. I know some of you aren't sold on Pierre Poilievre. I may not be either, but this is aggressive rhetoric, if nothing else, coming out of him. Next, from Documenting Bitcoin, Panama has passed legislation exempting Bitcoin from capital gains taxes. So again, just great to see more jurisdictions coming out with more favorable policies around Bitcoin. Meanwhile, the West drags their feet. Next from Matt Tebe, savor the great Musk panic on drinking the delicious tears of blue check hypocrites who've suddenly discovered the perils of a privatized speech landscape. And I think it is important. Sometimes you got to stop and smell the roses. Sometimes you got to appreciate the fact that, hey, maybe we don't live in a utopia, but at least people are freaking out on Twitter. And there's just something particularly humorous, I guess, about this entire situation where people are so scared of free speech, right? I can't help but feel like that telegraphs, it shows, it hints at how weak the other side is, or how weak they are in their conviction that they actually have facts to back them up. Because if you believe that you had truth on your side, if you believe that you were inherently right, I just don't see why you'd be panicking so much. And so, yeah, if nothing else, at least while Rome burns, as society collapses, we can, enjoy the little things like the left and progressives absolutely going ape shit on Twitter. And that's it for Pill Stories of the Day. Oh, I forgot to. There we go. That's it for Pill Stories of the Day. And I've got two memes for you. One's not so much a meme, but this is from Elon Musk. I'm sure most of you are already familiar with it, but I think it's important to understand that left, center, and right are not static positions. Of the most static, I do actually kind of believe the right is a little bit more static, but they're more like a drag along static, where it almost feels like they're usually just keeping pace. Okay, we're going to stay 20 paces to the right of the left. And so as the left goes more and more extreme, or more and more woke, or more and more progressive, whatever you want to frame it as, I actually think the right gets dragged along a little bit, but centrists, or people that actually just had a fundamental framework of policy and beliefs in regards to how society should be operated, a lot of us haven't dramatically changed our positions on things, and yet we find ourselves completely at odds with the old left, center, right paradigm. And if you guys aren't following Elon Musk, he seems right now to be on an absolute tear on Twitter. I'm definitely enjoying watching it. And then finally, anti-gun rhetoric. You can't fight the military with assault rifles. It can't be done. Laughs in Taliban, snickers in Viet Cong, goffles in IRA, and giggles in South America. And yeah, it's not just about hunting. And it's not even just about protecting your individual family. It's actually being able to protect you and yours, and essentially have a check and balance against government tyranny and government power. That's what the 2FA is all about, right? And the only way you're going to have freedom of speech is to be able to back it up. And I think that meme perfectly encapsulates my position on that. So hope you guys enjoyed this episode of the Maple Pill. It looks like something didn't go right in regards to my live stream, because it definitely usually we're able to at least break double digits in regards to concurrent live viewers. But I appreciate those of you that are hanging out with me tonight on Thursday night. If you enjoyed this, please consider smashing the like button, hit subscribe if you're new to the channel, and remember, sharing is caring, because the algorithm doesn't get it. It definitely doesn't understand me and doesn't want anything to do with me. But I appreciate those of you that are making this a two-way conversation, jumping in the chat, giving me your hot takes. We've got Kohana Roach, as always. I swear the WEF raised the greatest sock puppets. What's going on there? Greatest sock puppets of all time. It definitely seems that way at times. We've got Graham. We've got P58. We've got Al. We've got P58 again. Bang. Benjamin. All right, here's a real chat. Biden is a perfect example of a puppet. There is no way he's running the country. This charade needs to stop. Yeah, I can't even imagine that he's able to run his own life, let alone a country at this point. Mighty Motives in the chat. Hey, what's up? Think this is your first time in the chat. Appreciate you saying hello. P58, Biden is more than twice your age. I'm pretty sure he is. Yeah, I don't know actually how old he is, but he's got to be close to it. Slavery has been over a century ago. Yeah, and I think, again, like, understanding the fact that, like, slavery still occurs to this day, right? And that's often an argument you'll hear from the right or conservatives. I think the stat is like there's more than 14 million slaves right now in the Middle East and parts of Africa. And, I don't think there's anything wrong with educating people about the past. In fact, I think that that's very desirable. And I think being as clear and transparent about that past is extremely valuable. However, I'll give the benefit of the doubt here, a lot of the good intentions behind a lot of the wacky policies we see being implemented in regards to, racial equity or social justice or equality, whatever you want to frame it as. Again, maybe you've got the best of intentions, the best of feelings behind that, but trying to counter racism with a different form of racism, that's not the move. It just isn't. Harvard's greatest crime in present day is giving us the founder of Facebook to steal all our data. We've got Leah D in the chat. Kohana, most of the issues in the Black communities are caused and promoted by Black people. I'm Black, so I would know. And honestly, I honestly personally think it's sloppy. Are there racists out there? I've got no doubt. And I think there's racists of every, creed and color out there. I think the bigger thing is we're talking about, when people even say systemic racism, I think that that's a misnomer, personally, in my humble opinion, as a single white male. But why I think it's a misnomer is I think that what we're looking at more is economic policies, terrible education, and just a general lack of awareness, right? And don't get me wrong, things like redlining, blockbusting, all those policies that to different degrees were rolled out in the United States at different points in times absolutely have severe economic consequences. However, this idea of trying to coddle individuals or segments of society against understanding and interpreting feedback loops appropriately, honestly, is just going to create more degeneracy, more coddled individuals. It's honestly just a net negative, in my humble opinion. And I think that there's proactive things that we can do as a society or as individuals to try and help out everyone. But again, just most of the policies I see being rolled out, most of the stuff that we talk about here on the show, I don't think it's actually going to get the end result that the silent majority would like to see, right? It's being driven by extremists with extremist ideology. We've got Mighty Motive. Hey, Matt, was wondering if you could give your opinion on the future of the Canadian real estate market in Ontario and the rest of Canada later in the show or another episode with all your experience. Yeah, I'm happy to give you a quick take on it. And if you want, Monday nights, we do kind of a longer live stream. So hit me up some Monday night as well, and we can chat even further about it. But right now, very dynamic situation when we're talking about Canada and real estate markets. I think a few things that really needs to be determined before a person can decide whether now is the right time to invest in real estate or whether it's too risky is again, you need to understand your why when it comes down to investing in real estate, right? So what's your underlying goals and the purpose behind it? And if you're simply getting into real estate to make money, but you can't define it further than that, this is not the time to go and start gambling in real estate, in my humble opinion. The next big thing that you need to explore is what assumptions do you believe about the future? So there's a handful of different assumptions that I think really do play key factors in regards to whether you should invest in real estate in Canada today or in the near future. One is, what do you believe the future of inflation and interest rates are? And what would happen based upon your assumption under that to your real estate investing strategy. So, for example, if you were going to be a buy and hold investor that bought negative cash flowing properties solely off of the play of appreciation, well, if you also believe that we're in a high inflation environment that's likely to persist, and we're likely to see the Bank of Canada dramatically increase interest rates over the coming year or years, well, it would feel like your investment strategy is probably not the best play for your personal view of the Canada's economic future, right? So again, really important you kind of understand that. And then one last thing that I'll kind of highlight as well is understanding, actually two, I'm going to pick two more things. One is the opportunity cost. So what are your other options available to you in regards to investing, and do they better suit your underlying why and goal behind wanting to accumulate wealth or invest in real estate in the first place? And then finally, how long do you plan to hold that real estate? And do you believe that there's any sort of risk that we could essentially see government or various levels of governments start really dramatically attacking or going after real estate investors? And again, it really depends on your worldview, how you read the tea leaves, what your crystal ball tells you. Again, I know my personal hot take on things. I think that it's a riskier proposition to invest in real estate today than it was back in, say, 2016 when I started my YouTube channel. Same time, I know lots of people right now that are making shit tons of money in real estate and will likely continue to make a shit ton of money in real estate. However, people that are wanting to just find one copy pasta approach to real estate investing, where they're simply like, I just want a set and forget it business model where, I never have to pivot and, I'm not even going to consider the pivots available to me. I don't think that that's a smart move right now with just how dynamic everything seems to be in the world. So I hope that helps, Mighty Motive, and appreciate you jumping in the comment section. Ministry of Truth will soon come to Canada. Yeah, and we've already got it to different extents, right? But because we've got like the Heritage Minister who says they believe it's their job to essentially control information in Canada, as well as even like to a certain aspect history in Canada. It's wild. Leah says, hoping we might be touching on the ridiculous provincial budget. I actually haven't gone too down the rabbit hole on the provincial budget, but love to hear, is there certain areas I should be paying attention to? Right now, I guess I mainly do look at national news for the Maple Bill, but very happy to go further down the rabbit hole, particularly if you guys have some tips for me on what I should be looking at. Al says, if you print an entire copy of that budget, you would then have a lot of extra toilet paper available. I don't doubt that. We can't wave the F Trudeau flag, and I have a friend who gets harassed for a sticker, yet anyone who has the F cancer sticker, it's okay. I'm pretty positive they are both a cancer. Yeah, and actually, I really appreciate you bringing up the F Trudeau flag, right? Because is that a hate symbol, right? I would argue that that's just individual citizens expressing their displeasure with their existing prime minister, who is a public figure, right? It's not like you're just going after an individual citizen and making a personal threat upon them. It's more of a political commentary, in my opinion. The UK created the Balfour Declaration to create a homeland for the Jews. Every theater of war, World War I, World War II, a false flag to create the environment to that end. Okay, that's an aggressive stance, Bite Hunter, but I appreciate you sharing your perspective. I don't think that I would necessarily agree with that, and certainly not wholeheartedly. I do think that there's a lot of complicated geopolitics to something like Israel and Palestine. And if you guys want to go further down that rabbit hole, I really encourage you to check out the, I think it's a 4 or 5 part podcast series on Martyr Made, where again, he tries to explore the subject matter. I think he does a fantastic job by going, far back and really just exploring everything pre-World War I into World War I up until essentially the modern day. Spoiler alert, you don't come walking away feeling like there's a pure good guy from it, because there just isn't. But again, sadly, that's the case in a lot of geopolitics. Al says, 19 months, what the fuck? Even if you wanted to falsify a bunch of docs about her, it wouldn't take 19 months. Yeah, I 100% agree with that. It really is wild to think it would take 19 months to pull together that information. Oh, thank you, Mighty Motive. I didn't realize that was an old clip. I just saw it kind of making the rounds, but I think my commentary on it would still relatively be the same. And I personally imagine Jagmeet's position still the same, but definitely appreciate the perspective and the fact check on it. I believe the number is 7 kids total died in all of Canada. Kohana, I don't have any kids yet, but when I have, no one will tell me how to raise my child. These pharma companies are pure evil. I agree with you on that front. I think it's so important that parents take a more proactive role in their children's education. In a perfect world, I think that looks like homeschooling, pod schooling, unschooling, deschooling, whatever you want to call it. I don't think the system is the optimal solution for a child being raised. Graham says kids don't need the jab, but neither do animals. And I saw some videos of Toronto Zoo injecting all the animals. So sad or so odd. Yeah, I agree with you. And in fact, I'm pretty sure there was something about like one of the headlines even read like voluntarily vaccinating the Toronto Zoo animals. And now I think what they meant was like the Toronto Zoo is voluntarily vaccinating their animals, but the way when you initially read the headline, it made it sound like they somehow had the animals opt in, which one is just funny on the surface because how could they really give their consent? And two is kind of ironic because they essentially tried to make it non-voluntary for humans. But again, the way you read the headline made it seem like they got the animals' permission. We've got Dirty Burger in the chat. What's up? Jennifer Shaw, I'm building a pirate boat. All are welcome. Yeah, we're starting a Navy up here at the Citadel as well. I think at the end of the day, it's just, we all need to be being more proactive, right? Building parallel institutions, creating stronger local social bonds, all that jazz that we regularly talk about on the Maple Pill. Because when push comes to shove, if you don't have a neighbor, friends, or family members to turn to, that's what the government wants. They want you isolated. They want you alone. Because it's in those sort of environments where you're going to be at like peak fear, at peak like complacency and willingness to just conform to outside pressures. Bite Hunter, if you cannot beat them, join them. What's PFE, Pfizer, mRNA, Moderna, LMT, Lockheed Martin. Yeah, I get how people say that sometimes. I don't... it's easy for me now because I'm in a different financial position than I was. Oh, what happened to my? It was easy. It's easy for me now to comment and say like, no, I don't think you should be participating and trading in those stocks and stuff in an ideal world. And again, in an ideal world, I agree with that. But I am coming from the position of already like, accumulating a substantial amount of wealth. So in the past, I probably was less particular with my investments. Trying to think. I don't think I just more for a lack of opportunity and awareness than anything else. I guess I worked for a pharmaceutical company, so what am I saying? Nathan, as for finding a safe place on Earth goes, not sure one will exist much longer. This woke authoritarian agenda feels like a cancer spreading across the planet. I agree, but I hope, like a lot of parasites, there comes a point where it almost grows too fast, too quickly, and its population kind of collapse, or more likely, I kind of view it as like a pendulum, where the pendulum swings from one extreme, and hopefully we're kind of at the peak there, and we start to see the pendulum come back the other way. But we'll find out. Leslyn Lewis for the conservative leadership. I don't know her too well, but, a lot of the stuff I've seen her say seems reasonable enough as well. I think the most unfortunate thing about all the conservative leaders, other than Jean Charest, which I don't know why anyone would want to take him as a serious contender, unless you're mainstream media and you're just trying to destroy the Conservative Party. But outside of that, there's not one where you're like, this person 100% is committed to freedom and all their actions back it up, right? That would be the individual that I could actually get behind for the Conservative Party, but I just don't see it happening. Baber is good too. Yeah, I do agree. I think Roman Baber arguably is the most consistent from my perspective and my understanding with his actions and what he says backing his actions backing up what he says. But I don't know. He seems very regional. I don't think he's got a significant chance at getting it just because I think he's outside of Ontario, not that well known. And I think with Lewis, you've got a similar issue where I just don't think there's enough brand recognition. I think both of them should have been far more proactive in like Baber was, and maybe Lewis was too, to a certain extent. But I think that they just needed to have more general awareness if they really wanted to be able to beat someone like Pierre Poilievre. And I think that Pierre's social media game for the last couple of years has really been positioning himself for this eventuality. Trump is back on Twitter officially as of today. Interesting. Is that true? I would have thought Twitter would be breaking over that news. And didn't he just say yesterday that he wasn't going to go on it? But again, very well could be. I wouldn't be surprised. Used to think anarchists were the furthest left you could get, and considered myself libertarian with conservative leanings. With the shifting, some would call me anarchist. The labels are meaningless. Yeah, and I think that that's an aspect too for myself. I would have always associated as being like libertarian or minarchist, or really looking for the minimum viable government. But these days, I'm starting to think that it almost has to be an anarchist perspective to get like the sort of society and government that I'd want, where it's anarchist with voluntarism, right? Where essentially people are just voluntarily entering into any sort of government relationships. So again, rather than like voting for a party and that party getting to ride dictator or roughshod over an entire region or country, literally we could all just opt into whatever we wanted. And I think until people spend a bit of time exploring what that stuff means, it can feel very abstract and unpractical, and more like a utopian perspective of things. But honestly, again, I'm not saying that we'll ever get that, but I hope that someday I would die a happy man if I saw that sort of society flourishing, whether it be in Canada or somewhere else, and I got to participate to even a small extent with it. So anyways, appreciate you guys hanging out with me on Thursday night. I know there's a lot of things competing for your time, energy, and attention, so the fact you'd spend it with me does mean a lot to me. If you guys want more Matt McKeever in your life, you can check me out on Instagram. It's Matt McKeever Unfiltered. Reminder, I do upload these videos after the live stream to Rumble and BitChute, so you guys can always check it out there, because big tech's not always the best at notifying you when I go live. But either way, appreciate you guys hanging out. We'll be back tomorrow, same time, same place, 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And just remember, you're not alone. You're not crazy. That's what they want you to think. But in fact, there's a lot more of us out there that actually, we kind of think of ourselves as adults and believe we should be able to make our own decisions for ourselves and be able to make our own judgments. And, even use bad words if we see so fit to do so. And I'm glad that I'm not alone and I'm not crazy. So I'll see you guys tomorrow night, and enjoy the rest of your Thursday night.
Asking blue pill, red pill, corporate press, I've had my fill. I'm just a simple chap, believing in my own will. WEF, I am math, evil scheming, this is no drill. Haters masking boosted, but still win.